Hey YouTube, just wanted to quickly go over the latest and the worst of Star Trek: Strange New Worlds. So I just finished watching the third episode, where this to preface the what goes on in the episode, the crew is going to an Illyrian colony, and apparently Illyrians are alien race that perform a series of genetic experiments on themselves. It's not clear whether or not they're human. I think they are human. It seems like they're like an offshoot of humanity that instead of, banning genetic engineering, they decided to keep using genetic engineering. And they say later in the episode, instead of terraforming planets, they just changed their genetics in order to adapt to whatever environment. So it sounds like they're just humans with genetic engineering, which is like, okay, that's interesting. It's an interesting concept, but the show goes quickly off the rails, and I just wanted to go over like the terrible science that they apply. And I think I actually, this is the second time I'm making the video. The first time I made a mistake, so I made a lot of points in the first video. I might not go over all of those. I think what I'll do in this one is make it short and just kind of jump to the part where I think makes absolutely no sense. But first, I'll preface it with the crew is going to this Illyrian colony in a strange world where seemingly is abandoned, like there's nothing living on the planet, but there are these strong ion storms. And then Spock and Pike, the two good characters, they get stranded on the planet while the rest of the crew teleports back to the ship. But the rest of the crew, like apparently there was something that came back with the crew. And at first they just seem to have like an affinity to light, and they need more light. They need more light, so they keep doing weird things to get more light, like, turning lights all the way up or messing with the transporter or whatever. But it turns out it's some kind of a virus, and it's changing the people to do these like self-destructive things. Like the chief engineer tries to create, take a piece of the core of the planet and transport it to the ship to make it really hot or like lots of light. So they like heat, they like light. Midway through the episode, you find out that the first officer is an Illyrian. So it doesn't seem like Illyrians trigger anything as far as being like foreign in a transporter. She is human enough. She seems human. Everybody at Starfleet, the Federation, they all seem to let her go into different places. Like there doesn't seem to be any differentiation between Illyrians and humans. But then within the episode, she lights up like a firefly, which that would imply, I would think, some different proteins, some different foreign stuff that as a doctor or as other people, they'd probably know she's an Illyrian. But besides that point, the part that really bugged me when I was going through the episode was the part, again, it's with the doctor. So they always rely on the doctor for some terrible science. And so the doctor, Una, at this point, is the one that comes up with the solution. So everybody on the ship gets infected. They all have trouble with their light. They all need light. So they start sedating everyone. So they sedate pretty much everyone, and except at the very end, one of the people escapes sedation. And so her name is La'an. She escapes sedation, and then she runs to the warp core and tries to detonate the warp core or something like that. So the warp core, the center of the ship that, powers everything, she tries to overload it so she can get all the light she possibly needs or whatever. But the thing that kind of solved everything was that the first officer was not infected. So the first officer, who happens to be an Illyrian, she didn't get this infection. Presumably, they say something about Illyrians having really strong, like not immune systems. I guess it would be an immune system, but they say you don't generate antibodies. You just destroy all foreign invaders, right away or something like that. That's what the doctor mentions about Illyrians earlier in the episode. And so she's not infected, even though, like, as an Illyrian, she has other stuff going on. But the idea being that she is special. I mean, it actually reminds me of like X-Men the Animated Series. There was a much better episode of X-Men the Animated Series where Wolverine, because of his healing factor, is able to stop a plague that Apocalypse starts. That's actually a much better episode than this crap episode of Star Trek, even though this is supposed to be the science show and that's like a comic book show. So back to the piece de resistance of how they get out of this tricky situation. So they've got the first officer who is trying to stop this warp core breach from this one person, La'an, who is trying to trigger the warp core breach. But then magically everything gets better. Wait, why? How did you suddenly cure everyone on the ship? Well, the doctor says, it's okay. It's okay. We got an antidote. La'an, the person that was trying to do the warp core stuff, tried to jump into the warp core while the containment field was down. So that's not good. Anyway, as I was stopping her, she got a bad dose of radiation, and so did I. It's like, okay, so you both got like a ton of radiation that didn't give you cancer, cause you to be disabled or whatever. I'll give it to Star Trek that they can probably reverse whatever mutation that these people are getting. They can do genetic engineering. It's possible. Yeah, sure. They could probably transport, different amino acids. They could do certain things given that it's, they're highly advanced, whatever. So that's fine. They didn't get cancer from the massive amount of radiation, but the next part is the one that is just insane. Apparently my body cured both of us before I re-engaged the field. So the first officer's body, due to proximity, was able to cure the other person. And even in the show, they kind of have this line wait, La'an, she's not an Illyrian. How did your Illyrian body cure her of the virus? And here's the line that basically says it all and is why New Trek is terrible and science just gets thrown out the window because it's convenient. Her proximity to the commander created chimeric antibodies in her system. So there are two people standing next to each other. The one person's an Illyrian, an alien for all intents and purposes, and then the other person is just a human. So the human that's standing next to the Illyrian has antibodies due to the fact that she was standing near the first officer. Her proximity to the commander created chimeric antibodies in her system. So chimeric antibodies, I'm assuming that means that the commander is somehow transferring antibodies to this human. So her Illyrian self is transferring her own Illyrian antibodies to this human. It makes no sense. First of all, it doesn't make sense that the antibodies would be transferred through the air. If you don't just take a protein that's used to existing in a liquid solution, like an aqueous solution or whatever. You can't just take some sort of protein and then just puff it into the air and it will just float around, and I can just I'll just grab your proteins out of the air and just put them in my body, because that's how it works. But let's even suspend science for that one. Let's just give them this crazy, doesn't actually make any sense whatsoever, that the antibodies are just floating in the air and you can just grab them and put them in other people. Here's some antibodies, catch. That's complete BS. But let's assume that actually could be done. Maybe they package them up like a virus and then it gets just sent through the air. I guess that's probably what people were thinking of. The bad writers that write this show are probably like, oh, it's like a virus. I know viruses can go through the air, so why not antibodies, right? Anyway, so let's assume that dumb thing that is not true is actually true. Give them that. They still go to the worst part with chimeric antibodies in her system. So I'm going to take my antibodies, I'll throw them to you. You just take my antibodies and combine them with your own antibodies. So essentially, take your antibodies, combine them with my antibodies, and we'll have chimeric antibodies that can synergize and cure this disease that nothing can cure. So that is the craziest part of the episode, the part that I just saw and was like, okay, I'm done with this series. It's over. There have been so many mistakes, then this one was just the final one, the nail in the coffin, whatever you want to say. And then the last part that was kind of like the cherry on top of this poop sundae was I was able to synthesize them into a cure before they set. Like, what? What does she mean they set? It's not like a broken arm. Like, it's an antibody before they set. And then the last part, don't thank me. I know I'm good at my job. It's like, okay, great. It's like, this is just, professionals talking here. Like, I'm going to go and be aboard like a military ship, or I'm going to be part of like a highly serious endeavor and just be like, yeah, don't thank me. I'm just doing my job. Like, oh man, the writing is terrible. There's so many different elements of the show that are just, they don't make any sense. I mentioned this in the previous video. I didn't mention it in this one, but one of the things in this episode was, my daughter, she has a debilitating, she's going to die in 12 weeks. So I put her into the transporter buffer and I have to materialize her every so often. Otherwise she's going to die. It's like, wait, what? Doesn't the transporter work by like converting matter into energy and then like digitizing like the pattern so that then you can take that and rematerialize it like at any time? Like, it's not like, I don't know. I'm not going to go into it, but I think like there's so many problems with this new show and I'm just done with it. Like, the fact that it's trying to suggest that you can just stand near somebody and transfer antibodies to them. Like, never in like old Trek where they're like completely ridiculous explanations like this. Like, oh, it must have been the chimeric antibody. Like, they're just not even trying. Like, that's basic immunobiology that a middle schooler would know. So this show is just terrible and I would avoid it. I'm going to avoid it in the future. So anybody watching this video, please take my advice and do not watch Strange New Worlds. I mean, if they're willing to like come up with like random Deus Ex Machina, like really bad Deus Ex Machina, it's terrible writing. And even if the show like has some interesting points to it, it's just not worth your time. So steer clear and go watch Star Trek The Next Generation. It's way better. So bye.